Okay, welcome back. Now that we have set up the problem, we now need to define all of our terms. What is instant runoff voting? What is a spoiler candidate? And so on. Okay, so first let's talk about how you even store or display election data. What does an election outcome look like? We're going to assume throughout this project that there are only 3 candidates in the election. We're only dealing with 3 candidate elections. So think about Republican, Democrat plus 1 independent, or Republican, Democrat plus 1 Green Party person, whatever. We're always going to call them A, B, and C, just to keep it compact, So candidate A could be Trump, B could be Clinton, C could be Gary Johnson, whatever. Okay, when a voter casts a ballot, you don't just simply choose your favorite candidate. Instead, you get to rank the candidates. So instant runoff voting needs candidates to be ranked by an individual voter. So when the voter goes to the voting booth, they could say something like this on their ballot. I like A better than C, and I like C better than B. That's a way you can vote. You could also say that you like C best, A second best, B third best, whatever. Okay, so for the sake of simplicity, we assume every voter actually completely ranks the 3 candidates. They don't just show up and say, I like B. Okay, they tell you I like B best, but then they also tell you who comes next. Do they like C second best or A second best? This table down here is how we will display election data itself. Like once you actually get all of the votes, how do you display the entire election? Okay, so notice first, second, third here, you're listing who came in first, who came in second, who came in third on an individual ballot. This number at the top tells you how many people, or to be more precise here, what percentage of people voted this way. Okay, what percentage of people liked A the best, B second best, C third best? The answer is 21%. What percentage of people liked A best, C second best, B third best? The answer is 16%, and so on. Okay, so if there are 3 candidates in the election, notice there are only 6 possible ways to rank them. Putting A first, those options come here. If you put A first, you then only have 2 options after that. Who do you like next, B or C? And then here's B first, and then here's C first. 3 candidate elections. In such elections, a voter has one of 6 options when they vote. In general, we'll always represent an election outcome with a list of 6 percentages written as decimals like this, where the first percentage is the percentage of people who voted like ABC, the second percentage people who voted ACB, and so on. So for example, if I say to you, hey, here's the election, this is what the election data was, you then know that, for example, 10% of the population liked C best, B second best, A last. You know that 15% of the population liked C best, then A, then B. You know that 0% of the population liked A best, C best, C third best, B third best. Nobody voted that way for whatever reason. Okay, so that's how we will display election data. Let's move on to the next page. Let me define for you the 2 methods of interest. Plurality is our normal voting method. You just cast a vote for one person. So the winner of the election is simply the candidate who receives the most first place votes. So the way plurality works is you just ignore the preference data and look at first place votes. So this is equivalent to what we normally do. If you go vote for, say, Mayor of Liberty or for U.S. Senator or whatever, what do? You just cast like a first place vote. You're not allowed to say who you think should come in second or who you like third best or whatever. So in the example I have going up here, in this electorate here, notice that 21% plus an additional 16% of the electorate likes A best. So that's a total of 37% of the electorate thinks that A should be the winner. And then what? 12% plus 21%, that's 33% of the electorate likes B best, right? So these voters here in these 2 middle columns, where do they disagree? They disagree what happens after B comes in first, right? So these 12% of voters like A second best, and these 21% like C second best. But all of these voters here in these 2 middle columns agree that they like B the best. And then finally, 30% of the electorate like C the best. So under our normal voting method, A got the most first place votes with 37% of them, B got the second most, and C got the third most. So A would win. It's worth noting here, it's possible, of course, that multiple candidates will have the most first place votes. It is possible to have a tie. For the sake of simplicity, we will assume that doesn't happen. Okay, ties are very rare, so let's just not worry about them. Your code doesn't have to worry about ties when it comes time to build code. Instant runoff voting, how does that work? Well, basically, you scan your eyes across the data. Okay, so we scan our eyes across the plurality data. So we look at the first row here. And we say to ourselves, candidate A got 37%, candidate B got 33%, candidate C got 30%. So if you're just looking at first place data, C came in last. So what do? We just throw C out of the election. We say he came in last, bruh, out of here. You know, so you get your shepherd's crook or whatever, and you put it like around his neck and pull him off stage, right? Like in a cartoon. So you throw C out of there, and now the election becomes an election between candidates A and B. So how do you determine who wins that? Well, these 7% of voters, they are telling you that if C leaves, they prefer A next. These 23% of people are saying if C leaves, I prefer B next. So basically, these 7% of voters, their votes are just tossed to candidate A. These 23% of voters, their votes are tossed to candidate B. That's how instant runoff voting works. You create like an instant runoff election, if you know what that is. There's a runoff here between A and B. And whoever wins that is determined by who got votes after C was thrown out. So it says here in the English what happens, throw C out, what happens to her 30%? Well, 7% go to A and 23% go to B, meaning that A now has a total of 44% of the vote, while B has 56% of the vote. So B wins that election under that method. Okay, so again, just to summarize here, A has 21% of the vote, plus another 16% of the vote, of the first place vote. So that's 37% of the vote. They then get an additional 7% there after C is thrown out. B, on the other hand, had 33% of the vote originally. They then get a boost of 23 additional percentage points to get them up to 56%. And that is why B wins under instant runoff voting. It is worth pointing out that in this election, A won under plurality. So if this were just like a U.S. Senate election or whatever, A would win because A got the most first place votes. If we used a different method, like instant runoff voting, you would have a different winner. Okay, so this is worth pointing out because the very first time this method was used in a Maine congressional election for U.S. House, this happened, okay? The Republican candidate was like candidate A. They got the most first place votes. However, when the bottom feeder was eliminated, the Democratic candidate actually got more votes in the second round, and they then won. Okay, so this exact kind of thing happened in a Maine congressional district in 2018. The Democrat won because we were using instant runoff voting. If we had been using plurality, the Republican would have won. I should say here, I'm not saying that's good or bad, or I'm not taking political sides here. I'm just saying the choice of method matters, as this example shows. You can get different winners. Okay, so I want to pause the video here, and then I just want to define a few more terms for you next time. I want to define for you what's a consensus candidate. I want to define for you what a spoiler candidate is, and then we're done with the project setup.